Hello, everyone. We're gonna give people just a few minutes to get in here.
We're a little late.
We're not late. We're on time. Time is us. Okay. So while everyone has the opportunity to log in, I'm going to quickly message a few folks. If you guys are watching this later, feel free to forward it, fast forward to probably a minute and a half. And we're going to go ahead and, yay, here we go. So tonight, we are fresh out of a city council meeting here in Tulsa, Oklahoma. There's feels everywhere. So we're going to talk a little bit about that, what we just witnessed, what we just came from. We're going to talk a little bit about parts work, some more from our book, and somatic work. Actually, we're going to start tonight with the somatic work because last week it seemed like when we did that, everyone really responded well to it. So tonight we're going to carry on in that same fashion. How do you feel about that, Puppy?
Good for me.
Okay, all right, we're going to move this over a little bit. So while he's finishing gathering the masses and sharing, I'm going to do a somatic exercise with everybody.
Oh, you're gonna do it?
Yeah, you want to do one?
I'll do the one to close this out.
Okay, you'll do one to close this out. I appreciate it. Okay. And we're going to share this. Is this being shared on the page as well?
That's what I'm trying to do.
Share to a page. We're going to share to, I've got it right here, and
I can't.
say hi. So if you're seeing this, say hi. Like, share, tell people about your friends with the Inside Out experience. Maybe you've had an Inside Out experience. Maybe you're curious about having an Inside Out experience, and I welcome you to engage in that curiosity with courage and come check us out so you can enjoy some compassion. All right, I've shared. You've got it shared. Okay, so if you're sitting with me tonight and it feels right to you, I invite you to start just by rubbing your hands together like this. And just take a deep breath and notice from your stomach, and as you take this breath, how much you fluctuate. And deep breath in. We're just going to take 3 breaths to get started, okay? So that's our first one, and we're going to take another one together. Breathing in. And one more. Now, if it feels right to you, I invite you to notice your body and what it is resting on, what is supporting your body. Are you standing? Are you sitting? Are you perhaps laying down? And just notice what that feeling, that sensation of being held, of having a place to land, and a way to center. And just take note of that. Take note of how you're feeling emotionally, how you're feeling because of the weather, how you're not feeling because of the weather. What do you smell? What does life taste like right now? Is life delicious or is it on the bitter side? And as you take note of these things and you get present in your body, relax your shoulders, drop your jaw. I'm going to invite you to turn your gaze from your computer screen or your phone screen, whatever screen you're on right now. And I just want to invite you to look all the way to your left, okay, out in the distance. And then I want you to come forward with your eyesight, okay? Maybe look beyond your screen. And then we're going to look all the way to the right, for as much as that feels comfortable to you. And then we're going to orient back to the screen. We're going to do this one more time. And as you look out, I want you to think about similar colors that you see or similar objects that you see from space to space. So start with our orienting back towards our left, looking in the distance, and orienting back to the screen. And now orienting all the way to the right. Okay. So what about that exercise is effective? What's helpful about it? We're going to do a little bit more breathing, but I do want to ask this question. Do you know what it is? Why do we look in the distance? So one of the strains that happens to the body when we work on the screen all day is that it causes a lot of focus issues in your eyes long term. And so to strengthen your optical space, we like to orient both side to side and in the distance. And this is an exercise that we like to do when we find that our eyes being focused on this. It's very strenuous. You can already see I have a crease. This is the Zoom crease, as I'll call it, and it's part of just hyper focusing on a screen all day. So to help me relax and to also combat a little bit of this concentration tension that I have here, I make this face a lot at the screen. I will look off into the distance, and this also helps my forehead relax, my eyes can gain strength and focus. And now that we're back to the screen, let's take a few more deep breaths. Again, focusing on what your body is being held by or standing on or sitting on, okay? Deep breath in. And in again. Exhale, and just one more. Drop your shoulders, unclench your jaw, orient to the space with us, the inside out experience. Welcome. Make sure if you can that you have a bit of hydration near you. And with that, welcome.
Thank you. It's been a week already, and is it Wednesday or Friday? You know, we're back with you on a Wednesday, and as Coach just said, that we just left the city council meeting. We're there particularly for a particular item that was being tabled, oversight of city police, just so that you know. And to be honest, that was a little traumatizing. There was a lot of testimony and sharing and speaking. The thing that I found most traumatizing in that space, though, and I just want to talk about this to warm us up, because it speaks to how you can run into trauma and may not even be aware of it. Yeah. There were 20 people scheduled to speak in favor of oversight and 2 in favor that were not. Right. The 2 that were not were a couple. Okay, I'll just say it like it was. It was a couple. Lady got up, said whatever the hell she wanted to say, and her husband followed her and made even less sense, to be perfectly honest. But the reason that I said I felt traumatized in that space and in that setting was what the man, I was gonna say gentleman, and I caught myself because, hey, I don't know if he's a gentleman or not, to be perfectly honest with you. But the man that got up to speak was doing classic gaslighting. Classic gaslighting. Where are we going to get the money for this? He's on and went, and nothing that had to do with the humanity of the suggested item. Nothing.
No, matter of fact.
And that is something that Black people particularly have grown accustomed to. Not being seen, not being heard. What's this cost? Well, yes, when all the time we're talking about something that would affect actual lives, a video was shown of a 70-plus-year-old lady, church-going lady, not that that matters, who was having a mental breakdown. Mm-hmm. She was known to be bipolar, and the police were told that she was having an episode. Didn't stop him from caving her face in, tackling her, laughing at her. I mean, where's the humanity in that? And we're talking about money? That's what we're talking about? That's your opposition?
Yeah, the cost of doing the right thing is more than monetary.
Quite.
But that was the focus of this individual.
Yeah. And it was
speaking against
absolutely ridiculous.
oversight.
Absolutely ridiculous, if you ask me. But nevertheless, I did want to talk about something that everyone has been talking about lately as it relates. Go ahead.
Yeah, so because you want to go here, because I do want to give anyone who's watching an opportunity to speak, because I think it's important that we open this conversation. So with that, I want to give you guys our contact information. If you want to call in or text at that phone number or send an email, I would appreciate, and you can go ahead, I'll just keep it hold of it.
918-430-5009 if you'd like to call in while we're having this conversation, or if you'd like to call in after and just chop it up with us, whatever.
Yes.
Okay? But I did want to talk about what happened at the Oscars. I've seen a lot of conversation about this, and some of it I thought was worthy conversation, and some of it I just thought was just foolishness. But let's talk about what happened, okay? What happened was, in case you didn't know, Will Smith slapped Chris Rock for telling a joke that he didn't like. Now, what I saw, we've talked about in the past, Coach, about how every behavior speaks.
Yes.
Every behavior is a conversation.
Yes.
Okay? And the conversation that Will Smith was having was, in my opinion, that of a child that was helpless and didn't know any other way to be seen except for to strike another person. And I don't say this to to belittle anyone, but I do say that as an observer who is trained in mental health and trauma. And what I can tell you is that my wife explained to me, maybe it was earlier today even, that in Will's book, he talks about how he watched helplessly as his mother was berated and beat on or what have you. I think it's quite possible that in that moment at the Oscars that he was triggered and taken back to that place, reliving that moment, much like I'm sure Chris Rock is reliving that joke and what followed over and over and over again. You can't turn on YouTube. I don't care what you follow. You're probably going to see some kind of commentary on what happened, if not just a 30-second clip of the slap. But what I also saw was Chris Rock. Okay, and I want to give props because there's a lot of things that people could say about how he reacted and why he reacted the way he did. But nothing spoke more to me than, I believe it was 2 weeks ago, he was on a podcast and talked about his childhood and how that he was afraid of his own anger. He told a story about how he was a little guy, and I can appreciate that. I was always the littlest guy on the yard or on the football field or on the basketball court or on the playground and in the home, at wherever, okay? And with that comes some stuff, okay? Not the least of which bigger people think they can push you around or whatever the case might be. Well, Chris took one of those situations when he was a child And he said that he went home, he was furious, and he went home and he put a brick in his book bag and on sight smashed the bully upside the head with the book bag with the brick in it. And he really hurt that person to the point where they weren't sure that he possibly didn't kill the guy. And, you know, I'm not saying this as a joke. This is something that really happened, that he remembers, and you could see the restraint that he held about reacting in a way that I would imagine most of us would say that we would have reacted with like violence. And he stopped short because he had that fear. Now, why am I talking about this? I'm talking about this because we saw on display at the Oscars 2 parts of those actors, if we will. And really, that's what parts are for. They're for acting out when we find a place of disconnection.
Yeah.
And that's what I saw. I saw a child in Will Smith that was feeling helpless to help, you know, a woman that he loves, I presume. I mean, I hope he loves that woman. I really do. With the stuff that this man's had to live through just the last 2 years. I mean, I know more about their business than I ever imagined wanting to know in the first place, to be perfectly honest. Okay? But he went back to that part of him that was damaged and detached from the rest of him in that moment. Would you agree with that or disagree? You have anything to...
I would. I described it to you early today as here was this isolated part of Will that was on his way to the stage before his firefighter or manager could even get involved. And by the time, like, the whole apology was a complete firefighter just putting out a fire situation. And then the manager being the part that's screaming, "Keep my wife's name out of your mouth." And last week we spoke about parts work, and this week this has given us such a great way to see how all those parts worked together to get Will through the night, right or wrong. And I've stated to you before that I believe that in this situation, and I won't speak too much to it because
there's a lot of layers here.
There's a lot of layers, and there's a lot of layers that go beyond a moment on stage, on the public stage. There's a lot of cultural things I can't speak to. There's a lot of man-to-man things that I cannot speak to, but I can speak to humanity, and I can speak to parts work. And in this situation, I'm not so sure that it's easy to say right and wrong.
Exactly.
You know, you have an entertainer whose job is to tell jokes, and I'm a person who I totally believe we should attack ideas and not people, and therefore I don't understand why we need to make fun of bodies and body parts. However, I say that knowing full well I have called 45 an orange. And I have dehumanized that individual right down to inhuman. And
that's dangerous.
And it's dangerous, and I'm guilty of it, and so are many of our viewers. And it's okay, but where we are is clearly a place that the universe is calling us to grow beyond.
Yes.
And I'm not going to say, oh, comedians shouldn't do this or shouldn't do that. I don't know what it's like to have to make a living making people laugh. So I can't speak to what is and isn't on or off limits. And so with that, I will say that what we choose to make our muse is an expression of our love or the cry for it.
Amen. And the other thing, okay, and this is something that I really want you to hear, okay, because everybody's got all the takes about I woulda. Okay, fine. Let me ask you a question. You're in the same exact room with the same exact circumstances or what have you, except you're you and not Will Smith. And it's not Chris Rock up on that stage. It's your boss. It's your coworker. It's your spouse. It's some dude or some chick or whatever. This is the cost of not doing the work. This is the cost of not getting the help. Because I promise you, you would have gone out of that room like this. Stretched out, cussing like a sailor, whatever else, however you want to do it, or calmly. But the cost to you to not do this work that we're talking about can be exponentially worse than anything that's going to happen to Will Smith or Chris Rock.
It's more than monetary.
Much more.
It's even more than reputation.
It really could change your life, okay? And if you're one of those people that has a quick trigger, you might want to think better of that and start trying to investigate where does that quick trigger come from. And take it from somebody that used to be a cat that would slap a dude, okay? That's no way to live. That's no way to live. And it's literally a cry for help. So I don't see a tough guy taking out the clown or anything else. I see a grown man that was transported in a moment to his childhood where he couldn't help his mother. And he did, in that moment, he was a child with a bulldozer all of a sudden. Because that child didn't have the strength, the size, the mass, however you want to frame this, to fight back. But he's a grown man now. He's 6'2", 200 and change. Okay? Little different situation now. Oh, you want to pick on a weak woman? Let me show you what that looks like. Okay? But it was out of line. It was out of line. And if you behave that way, even in a moment, you get triggered. And you're in a moment. You better know how to deal with that. Because if you go around slapping people, you're going to be in a lot of trouble. Okay.
Well, yes.
That's all.
I appreciate you speaking to that. And with that, let's segue into parts work, because that's going to be shame and anger are two big trigger issues that we deal with in trauma recovery, and that is literally what we're watching on the world stage right now, is lots and lots of anger and lots of shame. There's shame on both sides of that issue. There's shame on both sides of the issue that was before City Council tonight in seeking an oversight committee for the Tulsa Police Department.
Well, I don't understand the against anger, but whatever.
and that's just it. Like, and this is where that phrase right there, I don't understand. What do we need to do? That we need to get curious.
Yeah.
We need to get courageous. You said that the opposition tonight, their statements about why they were opposed to it
made no sense.
And you know, it's there is understanding.
Not if you give a damn about people.
Right. And we have to care about people over money, and we have to care about people over systems. We have to care about people over policy.
Right on.
So with that being said, let's get into some parts work, and we broke down already what parts were in play between the Will Smith situation and
really,
the Oscars.
Guys, I'm sorry to cut you off.
You're okay.
If you got Will's ear, you know you're watching this, one of the many tens that are watching this, and you got Will's ear, tell him to get some help.
You know, I do want to say one more statement, and then we will move on for real. We saw people show up for Will immediately after the fact.
Yeah.
I'd like to know who showed up for Chris Rock. Because right or wrong, he absolutely deserves a support system to help him deal with what will now be his trauma, right? So we have one individual who was previously traumatized and brought that trauma into this moment and then perpetuated trauma on another individual. Mm-hmm. And that individual now must decide, how do I handle this trauma? And that is a lot of parts work, because it's going to require going within, reparenting places and people within that have been hurt and harmed. And that is how we will get around to restoration. So, in parts work, last week we left off with, do you remember?
The puzzle?
Yes, so we spoke about how puzzle parts are like the authentic self being the backdrop, being the place for the pieces to land. So I'm sitting here we've already done a somatic exercise, so I'm completely centered and grounded in my body, and it's body first in this space. In this 3D world, it's your body first, and it takes up space, okay? Within my body and outside of my body are parts. And where all those parts land is the body.
That's right.
So,
and if you don't know, you don't get rid of the energy that the trauma has deposited in your body.
right.
The best you can hope for in trauma that is in you is to transmute that energy.
Yes.
And what I mean by transmute, in case you're not familiar with that word, is to change it. Okay?
Yes.
Change it from a something that detached you to something that you can bring back now.
Yes.
Okay? That's what that means.
Repair, connection, restore
Yes.
that space. So imagining your body as the landing place for all the parts, both outward and inward.
Okay. So, we're going to continue with the chapter on IFS and parts work from Coach Pepper Joy's book. And it says, parts work is a lot like learning to parent the inner children, the inner child or children. Often the disconnect in understanding how healthy relationships work to begin with is where we find survivors get stuck in their trauma and healing journey. Like I said a few moments ago, Will's stuck at being that little boy that was helpless to defend against to defend for his mother. Okay. When we have a part that plays a negative feedback loop with shame, we often find ourselves at some point in resistance to that part, or perhaps we believe we deserve this inner abusive part. Sometimes we wane between the comfort of the familiarity in this loop being abusive and thus fawn with this part. Can you speak to that?
Yes. So imagine that you are a little boy and you are watching your mother be abused, and there is nothing you can do about it. And that where that lands in you is going to affect your speaking. And so there will be a disconnection with your voice because it was not heard and or pushed out. And so that part of your voice, that 8-year-old boy voice, is somewhere inside now holding that moment that you watched and experienced abuse in front of you, okay? But what can happen over time is that voice starts speaking internally. And sometimes that voice starts shaming you. Why didn't you slap them? You could have jumped on their back. You could have grabbed a knife. You could have called 911. And this is something domestic violence survivors live with, a voice like this all the time. And now this voice, maybe the narrative has shifted from, oh my gosh, we witnessed something horrible, to we are something horrible, and creating disconnect. And when you grow up with that in your developmental phases, that voice is so familiar, it's comfortable. And if that voice goes away, it starts making you go, what's going on in life? I don't know life without this voice. I don't know what to do without that disconnection. Because if that voice goes away, what's left? An emptiness. A very palpable disconnection. And so...
because that part had a job.
Yes. And now we've exiled it and it's off out here.
And now there's a void.
And now there's a void of disconnect. And so until we can bring him back into the fold, we will struggle. We will struggle making decisions with or without that voice coaching us or not. So that's why I say this part about the comfort of familiarity. This is the loop that domestic survivors get stuck in all of the time. And it's because the evil that you know becomes comforting. It's killing you. It's toxic. It doesn't actually serve you. But when you're in service to survival, it's a gift. It's a gift.
That's a good word.
All right, sorry, continue on.
Sometimes we want to fight it, silence it, and hurt it like it hurts us. If, however, we sat down with an IFS expert or a trauma recovery coach, we would be walked through a restorative conversation between ourselves, that part, and any other parts that may be contributing to the pain or healing of this part and their connection within the internal family. Experts of IFS utilize consent, compassion, courage, and curiosity in finding and acknowledging all parts that want to be seen. Coaches utilize different forms of rest, restorative response systems theory, whether they know it or not. Each part is given autonomy and space to speak. Each one's trauma response behaviors are addressed with restorative responses and healing. It looks like parenting two hurting and possibly angry kids. Now, picture that. Have you ever had to separate a couple kids that were, getting into it?
You had daughters. Tell us what that was like.
They weren't allowed to fight each other.
They weren't allowed to fight each other? Okay, well, I had 5 brothers. That's how they bonded.
We didn't fight each other. But yeah, I didn't let my kids fight each other, no. But
I have seen that.
You're out here doing this, you know, and you're trying to calm them down. Mm-hmm. It's that manager / firefighter in action, okay, saying, all right, calm down.
When we lived in Colorado, you were, one of your clients was the schools. And I loved the way that, I don't know if it was the principal or the counselor, but he said, one of the biggest things we see when we see kids fighting, it's always a hurt and anger. And he said, but the thing that we do, our intervention is to prevent that group up.
Yep.
He said, when 2 kids are fighting, right, they're gonna do what they're gonna do with or without the crowd, except in the case where the crowd is coming in and making noise and you're gonna let them talk like that, what's wrong with you? That every time is gonna escalate it every time. So if they can resist the group up, and this happens internally too in bullying situations. Sometimes you have parts that are bullying each other, and there are other parts, other exiles, other managers, other firefighters that are like, hey, I'm taking a side. And sometimes you will feel division within, not just disconnection, but you'll feel division because you've got parts that are bullying each other. And you have other parts that might be grouping up to inflame that fight, that argument, that disconnect, that divide.
Yeah, and that's really cool that you pointed out that your parts can start putting peer pressure, so to speak, on you, because if you've ever been in a situation like that where you're getting egged on to act out in whatever way, whether it's throwing hands or otherwise, sometimes there's a specific voice that pushes it over the edge.
Yep.
Okay, your big brother, your big sister, your best friend, whoever it may be, that say, you better go in there and get it, or whatever. Okay, that voice is gonna override the crowd. Mm-hmm. The crowd could be saying, no, don't do it. But if that one person that we have that respect for and that we place on, that we give and acknowledge as, an influencer to us, that voice can drown out the rest of the voices. That's a great point.
And I bring that up because that is one I do run into when I'm doing parts work, is sometimes a part wants to be seen and doesn't feel safe because other parts are attacking it. Mm-hmm. And so
saying, don't you dare.
Right. So if you are versed in restorative conversations and restorative justice, we talk about how justice is restorative justice is trauma recovery. It's true, because even in parts work we have to employ it. We have to go in as Switzerland and be like, look, we're gonna choose neutrality. We're gonna choose equity. We're gonna choose to, if you would, please sit down and hold space for this other part that's trying to come in and heal. Mm-hmm. And this is a common thing that I see. It happens. It's something that we're versed in handling. So I let people know that, because sometimes when you do try to have a session where you do parts work with yourself, it's hard to get there. And it's hard to get there on your own because you don't have a neutral voice. The authentic self can be a neutral voice if they're aware and have worked in this space enough. But that's something I don't even do parts work by myself very often, just because, or if I hit a wall, I know that I need to call somebody. It can happen. That's a thing. So yes, it looks like parenting two hurting and possibly angry kids.
So once the emotions are set aside, truth is spoken and understanding is realized. You ever notice that about emotions? Emotions are energy.
Yes.
Okay, I don't know if you're into manifesting or
And their energy
metaphysics
of
like I
word.
am, but emotions are very energetic. And if you're trying to put out a fire, you might want to consider pulling away the emotions from the situation. And that's one of the things that the somatic exercise that we did earlier will help you to employ. Because it's kind of hard to be frustrated or anxious or angry when you're just checking out your space.
Right.
If you're actually engaged in checking out your space. Okay.
The depth of presence that can come with healing your parts.
Yeah.
And showing up together, body first. Listen, all my parts, listen to me right now. We are all a part of this together. We all have a space here and we all have a job here, right? And that's where I love to start the conversation. That's why I love to start with somatic exercises, because I love to reconnect with my body. I love to be in, this is a vessel. Dr. J, the wonderful Dr. J, Judith Belton, you will be hearing more about her in the future, but she today in one of our classes likened groups to containers. And so if you liken your body to a container, what are you filling it up with? Mm-hmm. And you have all these energies in there. All your parts are little energy bubbles, if you will. And what are they doing? How are you filling them? How are you fulfilling them? Those all matter. Oh, I guess that's over. Okay. So.
All right. So we often, not so surprisingly, discover that the origin of these parts is a time and space of disconnect with the higher consciousness. The higher consciousness is the still small voice. Mm-hmm. And still small voices do not elevate their tone. They don't elevate their volume. They just are.
They speak like this.
That's how they speak.
Their presence.
And you've got to get things quiet in order to hear them.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
I should clarify that while there is subconsciousness, consciousness, and higher consciousness, I liken them as more of one. As the body is a single vessel with many complex systems, so is my view of consciousness. There is one and three parts within it, just like the Trinity and many other cycles and symbols of our humanity. Okay, at this juncture, we're now armed with a functional working understanding of internal family systems, or IFS, each role as well as their best and worst traits. Your parts are valuable little lights waiting for you to find your way to healing with them. Honor them, hear them, and heal them. Whew. Let us go meet them within ourselves and utilize courage, curiosity, and compassion as we do so. Parts are the pieces of ourselves often created from a trauma response. Their roles are to hold the trauma for the day we are ready to heal it. Remember, parts are attempted reconnections where disconnect has or is taking place. I think we said this last week that sometimes parts are called hats.
As you're wearing one.
As I'm wearing one. I wear many hats. Do you have a part that you call your customer service voice? Okay. Mm-hmm. Remember earlier, Coach Joy was talking about how, trauma can change your voice. Okay? Like, really, it's like, what happened at the Oscars when Will went and sat back down? Was he speaking in his normal tone of voice? No. There was this elevation in his pitch and a lot of growl and bass involved in it.
It sounded like hurt.
It sounded just like hurt. It sounded just like hurt.
Would you say you also heard fear?
Yeah. There was this fear of, from my perspective, there was this fear of rejection by his own loving wife. That, as in, he was afraid if I don't step up, then she's going to think less of me.
You posted on Facebook that people care about how they make you feel.
Yeah. That's a fact.
And it's clear that Will Smith cares about how
he makes her
his
feel.
wife feel.
Yeah. And he wanted her to feel seen and safe and protected. And like, hey, I got you.
Yeah.
Okay? That's what that was.
Right or
that's
wrong.
what that communicated. I got
Right
you.
or wrong.
No matter what.
Yep.
Now, it would have been nice if she'd have protected him also and grabbed him before he walked up on stage, but that's a conversation for another day.
She has her own parts. She has her own parts and her
she
own
does.
traumas, and clearly she was triggered.
Yeah. So, do you tap into a personality trait or a character when you do certain jobs or tasks? Now, I know from growing up around city, in the city, whatever, and you know, we even joke about this sometimes, some of my older friends and I, about how you make yourself bigger when you're in a confrontational situation and your voice gets growly like Will's did, and you might even start like not acting normal, like looking around, you know, like you're just going to be off the chain. You're just going to snap at any moment, whether you are or not.
And you're stirring up your energy.
You're stirring up your emotion and your energy to get you to that place, okay, to where you can do whatever physically you feel like you need to do. And, you know, I always liken this to, I always tell people, you know, hey, as long as they're talking, there ain't gonna be none, okay? And that's the truth, okay? But what happened? The talk came after, okay? The talking came after, all right? Because he couldn't puff up there, okay? Because if you puff up there, then we got even more problems, okay? You know what I'm saying? This is what I'm talking about. Like with you might look at this and say, yeah, there's a 5-year-old inside of me, or there's an 8-year-old, or a 17-year-old, or whoever, okay, inside of me that needs some healing, but, you know, I don't have time or inclination. This is the cost of that, of not addressing that.
Yeah.
I'll say it again. This is the cost of not addressing that.
Well, and we don't even know the full cost, to be honest with you. Like,
No.
We
know that everybody
We know
in
what we
the
see.
damn world is talking about it. That's
Yeah.
about it.
We're paying
Okay.
a cost for a trauma.
Right. So the desire to disconnect and assimilate to a situation as a part of your authentic self rather than the fullness of your authentic self is an acceptable and healthy way of using parts. Think back to the customer service voice. We all play a part. We all wear a mask or change our voice to survive and on occasion thrive in a space where such things, such as parts, are called for.
Yes.
Sometimes these parts are tapped into as a result of dissociation. Sometimes they are resourced as protectors, firefighters, or managers. How do you know what job or origin a part is from? You have to go within, put ego and emotion on a shelf, and get curious with yourself and your parts. Maybe they aid you in a healthy way. Maybe they are codependent for you. They all work in service to your survival. You are in control. You decide the rules, boundaries, and limitations of your parts. This doesn't always mean you know when you're disassociated and embodying a part. Because when we grow with them and they are so intimately familiar with us, they become filters that are seemingly such minor adjustments to our perspectives. We rarely notice they are coming and going within ourselves and how we engage externally.
So I like to bring this up because I have a live part. So I have a Facebook live part. I have a Twitter voice. I have a...
I'm laughing. It's a private joke.
And clearly I have parts that Jimmy's aware of. And I, like when I'm with Jimmy in certain settings, I tend to have a different voice there too. And you used to call me a chameleon. But I am a social chameleon and a social butterfly because there is safety and unsafety. We've talked about the safety and unsafetyness of being seen, when it's safe to be seen, when it's not safe to be seen. And so when you're used to operating in the world and you might have a Zoom meeting voice, you might have I know when you show up, like when we lived in our apartment and we had to go deal with maintenance. It was always something with maintenance, right? Now the office workers knew if I showed up that things were still good. But if Coach PJ ever had to show up, they were going to wish they had already gotten someone to our apartment, because the person that he was in that space was not someone that we'd want to invite to a party, perhaps.
No.
And so I say that to say that it's
wanted to
very
clear the party out.
Right. that part. So there is ebb and flow within our parts, and it's very much, we've talked about the autonomic nervous system and how in that system there's actually 4 different systems and they work in congruence. So do your parts. You might be shifting out of one part and into another when you are doing things throughout your daily life. And I recently listened to a podcast that was talking about focus, attention, and awareness. And it was so amazing. It was a little bit groundbreaking for me talking about parts, because where you shine your light, where you hyper focus, where you give attention, what you speak to, what you sow energy into is what's going to bubble up. And it's going to bubble up in the authentic self as well as the parts. And I say all this to say that when you have a part that is really loud, it's hard to not hyper focus on them and then also make the mistake of thinking that's a part of your identity. It's okay for something to be part of your identity. It's not okay to let a part control your identity, because that's where you start getting into the tough guy. You start getting.
I'll take no mess.
And it's out of a space of survival, right? Because when you go out, like maybe that's the part you have to resource more. If that part is healed and then you're resourcing them, think about, like, I know every day I have a goal to be a better woman than I was the day before. And I think about the more I heal my parts, the more that woman is who shows up. That authentic me shows up. And I'll make mistakes, and so will my parts along the way, but we'll absolutely all show up together, and we'll all show up in harmony, and we'll all show up in connection. And when we show up in connection and we show up in presence, there's a myth that we can multitask. We're literally just shifting. I'm opening windows, closing windows, opening windows, closing windows. We're doing the same thing with our parts. So some of us have our screens up, and I'm giggling because look at mine. And we have like all these tabs open, right? I have like, how many do I have open right now?
Too many.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I don't want to tell you how many more, but I know.
It's a lot.
It's a lot. So there's a lot of parts that I've got going on my screen right now. But I say that to say, like, if you think about your life and your brain, you think of your brain like a computer. You have all these tabs open. All these parts are out. You haven't gone back to those tabs and resolved. You haven't gone back to those tabs and restored what you needed there. Some of these tabs, I'm not going to lie, are expired tabs that I have open right now, like this one. And then there are parts, that, again, you need to go back and you need to restore something there. And if you have a part that's being loud, it's loud because it needs you to give it attention. And it needs you to give it attention because it's probably telling you it's time to heal. That's when parts get loud. The squeaky wheel gets the grease, as they say. It's the same thing about your parts. Sometimes, like we saw one very loudly last night, and it is deeply wounded. And today at City Council, a lot of parts showed up to talk about, to make sure their voices were heard because they've been wounded. Community members showed up because they've been wounded and they need healing, they need restoration, they need repair, and they need rest. They need the restorative response system theory. Okay, I'm going to stop preaching now.
All right, we'll go on a little bit more. I was an adult before I learned about narcissism and how to recognize it. I grew up with it from a parental figure. I was groomed and conditioned, me and my parts, to be a narcissist dream come true. We're just going to keep going.
Yeah, we're about to end, yeah.
I tended to avoid conflict, fawn, freeze, and switch out masks, hats, or parts as needed from one moment to the next, all in accordance with the wicked emotional manipulation of the narcissist in the room with me. I sometimes felt like a fawn waiting to be preyed upon and devoured by the predator narcissist. Instead of being narcissist savvy, I was a lamb to slaughter in denial and dissociation to the danger right in my space. Because my survival rate with narcissists is 100% so far, my parts that serve to my survival are also now facilitating my continued healing from betrayal and narcissist trauma. This reframing is a technique heavily utilized and highly resourced by coaches and survivors in the restoration and healing process. It is in no way a desire of the coach or healer to remove or further disconnect and or isolate any of your parts. We all have parts, and all of our parts matter and have important roles in both our survival and healing. Healing and restoring relationships to healthy functioning harmony with your authentic and higher self is always the goal and safety of the rest. Restorative response systems theory. Yeah, that's important to know. I mean, I think I said at least once before that I believe that DID, which is
Dissociative identity disorder, which has been renamed 1,000 times.
Yeah, it used to be, what did they used to call it
multiple
when I was a kid? Multiple
personality
personality disorder. It's garbage. It's bunk. Okay, I'm sorry, it is. We all have those parts, those individuals living inside of us. Perhaps we don't get as carried away with ours because we're not as traumatized to the extent that some of these people that identify as such have been, but same work. It's the same thing.
Right.
It is the exact same thing. I mean, my head doesn't spin and foam comes out of my mouth because I switched which hat I'm wearing today. Okay? And I can tell you, like, Healer James is completely different than even Coach James. It's amazing. Okay? Like when I'm operating in the gifting of energy healing, it doesn't feel like when I'm doing spiritual coaching. It doesn't feel like when I'm, my presence is even different.
Mm-hmm.
Okay?
Mm-hmm.
Now, somebody 40 years ago would have said that I had multiple personality disorder. And there's nothing more ridiculous than that. It's just me. It's just the parts of me that I've designated to do certain things.
Yes. I want to say this much. If you are listening and you have been diagnosed with that disorder, this is not to say that your diagnosis is not valid.
Yeah, you have a real problem, yes.
You have a real struggle. If that struggle is further traumatizing you, I would question the approach with which your struggle is being addressed. If, however, you find that medications and therapies are working for you, that's healing work. And as long as you are not being shamed for having a different challenge in your journey with your parts, then continue the work. You're doing the work. You're doing the right things. But if you hear nothing else tonight, it is this. Whether your parts are speaking from a cry for love or they are speaking from a space of love, there is no reason for them to be shamed. There's no reason to carry a burden that says you're not worthy, because you are. You and all of your parts, no matter how healed or unhealed they are worthy and worth the work that it's going to take to heal, restore, and repair. So as you hear Coach PJ's words, maybe I could feel some energy that might be like, wait a second, you're not a doctor. And you're right, we're not doctors, but we are trauma coaches. We are somatic embodiment coaches. We are healers. And we do know that for us, healing looks like going to the source of pain, to the source of the problem, not just treating the symptoms. So when I'm working with someone and I'm working with their parts, your parts are all symptoms of something you have going on. And they are valid in their existence. And they will tell us by their behavior, by their cry of love for love, or their space they hold for love, what that is. So, all right.
Did you want to talk to the narcissist survivors, since
narcissistic
you spoke
survivors?
so clearly about that in the book?
I feel you all. You're in my heart. When we grow up with certain dangers, it's easy to become blind to them, because it doesn't serve us to be scared of what is our everyday existence. And I say this so Coach PJ, you've spoken before about how, like, I'll see a microaggression and I'll be like,
yeah.
And you'll be like, I don't have time to notice that anymore. My existence is past that. I can't sit here and micromanage all the microaggressions that come my way and call out every single one, because it's exhausting. I do nothing else with my day. And I say that because when that system is a very narcissistic system that makes you feel and live that way. Mm-hmm. That is everyone who's ever grown up with a narcissistic parent or caregiver. You get blind to what they look like because you don't know anything else. And so if you had to sit down every day and go, I'm going to have to act this way in this moment and shift to that in this moment, if you had to think about that, code switching is kind of what that's like. That is exhausting, and it's all you get done every day. And it's no wonder you have no capacity for anything else. It's no wonder your capacity for depression increases, or anxiety might increase. Your capacity for the fight response might be more intense. Your capacity for the fawning response might be more intense. And fawning is the one that I see most with survivors of narcissistic abuse, because fawning is how we de-escalate inflamed situations with our narcissist. Mm-hmm. And we never know what it is that's going to be gaslit or inflamed by them. So we have to be quick on our feet. We have to respond. We have to stay reactive, because we have to react to moment to moment to moment in service to survival. So it's very exhausting. If you find yourself to be that way, I know for me, something that happens because of my conditioning with narcissists and my conditioning with fawning, I used to attract a lot of narcissistic friends, and quickly learned, I thought it was me. I thought it was me all the time. I can't keep friends. I must be a terrible friend. I upset my friends. I get gaslit by my friends, but I didn't even recognize it as gaslighting. I just really thought that I was a bad person or a bad part or whatever the thing is. So to all survivors of narcissistic abuse who are in my heart, I know what that's like. There's layers and layers of betrayal trauma. And I think I talked to you about this before, where, with narcissistic abuse, it's like complex trauma. Mm-hmm. It's not just a one-off incident, because there's an addiction that happens in the brain with narcissists. It becomes a lifestyle, and it becomes such a filtered lifestyle that we forget who our authentic self is in that, because we're never getting to be present with the authentic self. We are constantly switching between parts in accordance to what the narcissist is demanding in that moment.
And that's not a good way to live.
It's not a good way to live. There are better ways to live. So that will serve you in survival. Where it won't serve you is in thriving. And we'll get into this in another session, but I do want to wrap up and respect the time of the people that have been watching. But I do want to say that If you find yourself dealing with the fallout after a narcissist, or you're like, I'm in recovery from a narcissist and suddenly things got calm and that's freaking me out. It's a very common complaint that we get on that recovery journey from narcissism, because without that chaos, without that goading, without that gaslighting, it feels like a different world. An unburdened world can seem scary. So reach out if that is you. But with that, I haven't gotten any... we did get a few comments. Oh, sweet.
Okay,
Let me go back. Okay, so the first one was Sarah. Sarah, thank you so much for commenting this. She says, I have about 1 million parts. Then it might feel like just a lot of voices. It might only be 5 or 6 that are just really loud.
I feel like that lately too.
You're not alone in that. You're not alone in that. Sad sounds traumatic. Would have been devastating for me to witness that. So Desiree, I'm assuming you're talking about the video we watched earlier. Well, we didn't watch here on this live. I'm speaking to when we were at the council meeting earlier. So yes, if you find yourself triggered, if you find yourself with a part that is hurting and loud, we have exercises, we have healing modalities, we have help for you. But to close out tonight, I'd like to have you lead us in a somatic exercise, because as we learn about parts and we talk about shame and we talk about surviving things like narcissism, and even tonight with the city council felt a little gaslighty and narcissistic. So it's important, the best way to combat that is living your best life. And to do that, you must reconnect with the body. So remember, when we experience the world, it's awareness with the body first. Your body takes up space and you sit in the power that is your body. So with that, I'll let you take it away.
Well, the first thing that I want you to do is to notice your physical comfort or discomfort, as it may be. Just to make yourself aware of your comfort physically. Tune out your surroundings for a moment and bring attention to your physical self and your comfort in this experiencing technique that we're going to share. Take your time through these steps so that you spend at least a minute within the entire exercise. So while sitting in your chair, I want you to take a moment and notice your overall experience. You can take a look around, look at the floor, look at the ceiling, check your exits. Now I want you to move your feet on the floor, moving and shifting, even if you want to go as high as the hips, until you feel really connected to the floor. You can pick them up and put them back down. You'll notice that I'm moving back and forth. Whatever feels right to you in the space, just do that. But let's get our feet planted, and secure on the floor. Now I want you to feel your back and your bottom, your butt on the chair. Take notice of how the chair supports you, And ask yourself if you're perching in the chair, If so, you should allow the chair to support you, And again, whatever feels right, what position that is. Now adjust until you feel your comfort spot. And then just take a few moments to really enjoy the comfort of being supported by the floor and the chair. You're being supported by the chair, stabilized by the floor. Now I want you to look around the space that you're in and notice something that feels resourceful. In my case, I'm gonna look at Coach. And she blushes. It could be a tree outside the window. It could be a piece of art that's hanging on the wall. It could be a calming color that you have the room painted. It could be any number of things. It could be your computer screen. Maybe that brings you resourcefulness. Now I want you to also notice your overall comfort, physically and emotionally. Just take a moment to notice that. And hopefully by this point, you're oriented to a space physically and emotionally that is well, that all is well. And just sit with that. And you'll notice Coach Joy is in the area here, okay, connecting with herself. She's resourcing her hand, okay. If that's one of your moves, I also want to challenge you to take that a little further, Coach, and notice how your hand feels. Notice how your hand feels. How does the tactile sensation of your shirt feel on your hand? Like for me right now, I'm feeling my beads on the back of my hand, and how that makes me feel good. I don't know why, but it does.
That smooth.
It's like a smooth but bumpy. You know what I mean? So that's just an example of how you can resource yourself. Okay, and one of my go-tos, I'm just going to give you a freebie. If you're ever in a pinch and you feel yourself escalating outside the window of capacity, which we've talked about in the past, grab your thumb. Grab your thumb either like this, or you can do it like this.
I was doing this during the council meeting
Right?
tonight. I was like,
I was actually doing this one.
So the next time you're in one of those meetings that could have been an email.
Yeah, just grab your thumb. Grab your
the
thumbs.
So this is, let's talk a little bit about this before we let everyone go.
Okay.
Why is this one, the thumb, so important? So you can go through and look at all the nerve endings that happen in this space. There's a technique about how to combat headaches even with putting pressure on the fatty part of the hand.
Right here. Okay.
But early on in connection, the sucking of the thumb, that's a connection, that piece that happens in that early attachment space.
It's an attachment cry.
Yes, it's an attachment cry. So when you find yourself feeling a bit out of sorts or in a space where you're not feeling comfortable, do this and just notice, like, how does it make me feel from the top down? How does it make me feel from the floor up? How does it make me feel on this side?
And you can give it a squeeze.
Yes.
Give it a squeeze and let go.
Yes. Something else that we practice frequently with clients is this with
The shoulders.
the whole scrunching of the body and then releasing all of the pressure. Do that 3 times in a row with a deep breath and tell me how that makes you feel.
That's a reset.
It is. It's
That's
solid.
a game changer.
So, thank you so much for that exercise, Coach PJ.
My pleasure. Thank you for your work here that we've been sharing. And thank you all for your attention. As always, if you have any questions or comments, please feel free to leave them in the space provided. And we will see you guys soon, probably in a couple days. We'll see what happens.
We'll see what happens.
We may have time on Friday.
There you go. Thank you all for joining us, and go live your best life from the inside out.
Namaste.